Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Release Day podcast. I'm your host, Alex Heward, and joining me today is folk singer-songwriter and lifelong musician Ken Tizzard to talk about his collaborative album, All Together Now, that was released on May 18th, 2021. Ken, thanks so much for joining me today, man. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Alex. It's great to be here. This is, I remember you telling me about this podcast last year when you were helping me figure my way out through some stuff, and it's nice to see it up and running now. It's great.
I really appreciate that, Ken. It was awesome to connect with you back then, and that was when you were getting your Whiskey Wednesday series off the ground, and we'll get into that later, but it's been going strong for a year, and I'm excited to tell our listeners a little bit about how you've progressed a great virtual show.
Very cool. Thank you.
Now, I introduced you as a lifelong musician. Yep. Is that true? Is that all you've ever done? Because it really feels that way.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, when I was, back home in Newfoundland, I was playing music, and I was, I worked at Subway when I was a teenager, and then I came to Toronto, and when I first landed in Toronto, I bounced through a whole slew of telemarketing jobs, like within the first 2 weeks I was there, because it was the only jobs that I could actually get. But, after about 8 hours sitting on the phone, I'd usually quit and walk out. So I went through a bunch of them really quick. And then I landed a job at Music Express magazine, which in the late earlies and early 90s, late earlies especially, was producing like almost a million, sort of large format magazines worldwide. Like, I mean, this was a big deal. It was like, Rolling Stone, Spin, NME, Music Express. And I worked my way into being photo editor there for a couple of years, which was great because I got to work with photographers like Herb Ritz and Annie Leibovitz, Andrew McNaughton, shooting bands like REM and U2 and Annie Lennox. And it was wild. Suddenly but it was great because I just arrived in Toronto. I had a job in the music business. I was dealing with record companies. I was dealing with artists. I had a lot of time to chat with artists, at the photo shoots and stuff, and I was a young musician. That was what I wanted to be. I didn't really want to be a photo editor. It was a really, really good job to introduce me to the music scene. And it inevitably led me to meeting Jake Gold. And then when the Watchmen were looking for a bass player, he came to me. And that led into the Watchmen, 20 years touring there. And then that led into Thornley and Big Wreck, another, 8 or 10 years there. And then I finally kind of went, I need a break. And, I got sucked down this wormhole of rock and roll for 30 years. And being a punk rocker as a kid, I loved it. And I tried to bring all my punk rock credibility to the Watchmen and Thornley that I could. As a bass player, it's a great thing to play driving music. It's a really satisfying feeling. But after almost 30 years of it, I sort of had to pull back the reins and say, well, I've got some kids. I've really kind of lived the rock and roll dream. It's been a lot of fun. I've worked with some of the greatest musicians that I've ever had the opportunity to work with, but it's time for me to break it down and write some, sort of more narrative style songs that I appreciated listening to. And like when I was off the road, I wouldn't go to see Soundgarden or, Pearl Jam. I'd be going to see Bob Dylan and stuff like that. So even though I was living the rock and roll life, at the end of the night, I'm sitting in the back of the tour bus smoking joints and listening to Nick Drake while the big party is happening in the front of the bus. So it was a nice thing to finally find my way back home to roots music, Americana, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, folk is one that a lot of people fall into as well. So it's really nice to have made that full transition.
That's awesome. Wow. I didn't even, I feel like we could have even had like a full podcast chat about your photography background there. That's awesome.
Very cool. It's a cool topic, actually. This was when bands like Nirvana and the Smashing Pumpkins were just breaking, and they were coming to Toronto and playing like at the Rivoli and stuff, doing media shows. And I was going to these shows and seeing these bands like before the albums came out that made them huge. I saw so many bands in small clubs around Toronto because I was involved with the media. It was an amazing, amazing time.
Well, yeah, that's great. And you guys as the Watchmen, you ended up recording with Andy Casper as well, who recorded Nirvana, some Nirvana tunes.
He had just done REM and Soundgarden, and I think Alice in Chains, and a few others just before we came into the studio. And we went down to Studio Litho, that's Pearl Jam studio, or Stone Gossard's studio, and we recorded down there in Seattle for that record. That was amazing because, you get people dropping into the studio, like, the Pearl Jam guys, I think one of the Soundgarden guys was around one day. Greg Keplinger was around drum teching for us. It was sort of the scene, you know. It was really cool to be brought into that scene to make a record. And we made that Silent Radar is one of the classiest records that we have for sonics and production, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. And yeah, you guys even said just the atmosphere of you guys recording was just so perfect for you guys. And it's great to hear that, you know, because, you know, as much as maybe, and I think it was Danny that was saying this, you know, you don't think about it until like it being so amazing at the time mm-hmm. It feels like it was really a lot of work. But when you think back to it now, it was, you know, just the atmosphere you guys needed to be in to record that album.
It was amazing. And so much of the atmosphere had to do with Adam, his process. A lot of the great producers that I've had the opportunity to work with, John Wynot's another one who spent almost as much time getting us in the mood as they did twiddling knobs, if that makes sense. Yeah. You know, I can use the John one as a more direct, like when I was doing my first record, my second record, my first acoustic record, we went down into the studio. We went to Blue Rodeo studio and recorded it. So I'm in this massive studio in Toronto with all of this gear and all of this equipment and great drum kits and bass amps, like all of, you know, everything that Blue Rodeo own is there. And it's just me sitting in a corner with an acoustic guitar and two mics. And I said, how can we get this going? And he said, oh, don't worry. He said, we're going to do it. And what he did was we'd show up and we'd kind of have lunch and have a coffee and smoke. And he'd start playing some tunes. I remember one day there was a song that I've been trying to get the day before, and I couldn't quite get it. And we came back in, and he said, I got some stuff I want to play for you. And he showed me a video of I'm not going to remember his name right now, but it was a minimalist Romanian composer playing this, you know, sort of one note, sort of every, you know, sort of 8 seconds type thing. And he played me this entire piece, and it just kind of got inside my head. And as we talked about it, went back and listened to it, he looked at me and said, "You're ready, go record that song now." I said, "What?" He said, "The song we're working on last night, right now in your head state, just go over and play it." And I went over and played it, and it was caught. It was done. It was like, so it's so often, you know, and as much as producers are good at guiding you sonically and knowing the equipment and all that, there's a lot of it that has to do with sort of putting you in the right head frame. And that was another thing that Adam did really well, managing the four of us down there, you know, all going crazy all day in the studio wanting to record. And he's like, let's just, you know, and, you know, it was often sort of towards the end of the day or even late at night when he'd say, let's try this tune. And we'd go in and pop something out and he'd go, that's it. And it was like, it took all day to get there, but it was just, he just wanted to make sure we were all in the right place.
Yeah.
It's a really, really important skill for a producer.
That's wild. Adam Casper. Sorry, I said Andy Casper. That's Adam Casper. Man, so cool. But that's odd, and it's perfect to hear that about you know, how that interaction with a producer happens. And I can't imagine that how does that translate into creating an album like All Together Now? Because with All Together Now, this is, you know, an album of cover songs that the songs you've played and you've developed sort of your own styles for. You can hear them, a few of them I think you played throughout Whiskey Wednesdays, but this is over 10 plus years of you playing these songs in the bar. I think that little pub probably there, you know, and then taking these and turning them into an album with guests from all across, you know, the music community and big names. You know, that's wild. How do you like get from that to that producer mentality to kind of make something like this happen? Everything happened remotely. You know, I'm kind of piecing all of this together, but
it was a big puzzle. I mean, shortly after the first Whiskey Wednesday live stream that I did last year, I was really quite surprised, and in a pleasant way, of the reaction that I got. Like I had a fear of live streaming, even when I was playing in bars or clubs, and even with the Watchmen, when I look out and see people recording with their phones, it's always like, I know this is going to look crappy and it's going to sound crappy and it's going to be shaky and I'm going to hear somebody next door singing out of key, and you know, it's not what I want to see when I'm playing. And that always scared me. And the permanency of the internet scared me as well. I'm like, you know, oh God, what if I'm too stoned and I forget the words? And then I realized, well, if I'm too stoned and I forget the words, I make them up, or I, you know, tell the audience I've forgotten the verse and see if anybody reminds me. Yeah. And these are the type of things that that I really quickly came to love about the live stream, is that the intimacy is there. And, you know, if you try and do everything perfect, you're going to strangle yourself. But if you just relax and have a good time with the people that are there and just do it for the right reasons, it turns into something beautiful. And with that in mind, after doing the first few Wednesdays, because I had spent a year in isolation already, my wife had had a stem cell bone marrow transplant. And we were in Ottawa isolating for a year before we came back home. And that's when COVID hit. And then we went into another isolation. So I'd already spent a year on myself living in a bubble. And I had made some adjustments to my studio practices and the way I was working with people because I couldn't leave the house. And I know that I went through a lot of struggles those first few months. So when the world shut down, I kind of felt, I remember CBC calling me and asked me for an interview during the first shutdown. They're like, you've been doing it for a year. Can you tell people, how you got through it? And while I was doing that, I thought, well, maybe I can help some other musicians. So I just kind of went online and said, I'm going to record 13 of my, most played cover songs. If anybody wants to help out, or if you're building a new home studio now with the lockdown, let's all get together and see if we can make a record. And I was expecting to get maybe a half a dozen, sort of people, sending me out of tune guitar tracks. But what I ended off with was a massive list of almost 70 musicians, of which 45 made it to actually playing on the record. And the other ones that didn't, they didn't make it because of the musical reasons. They made it because of COVID related reasons, family reasons, work reasons, all of these other things. Some of them even couldn't, Long McQuaid was sold out of, some of the gear that people were looking for because everybody was, what I mean? Everybody set up a home studio or a podcast studio.
Oh, yeah.
So all of a sudden I had all of these people and I kind of went, okay. And that was when I took a step back and I said, okay, I'm going to need to reassess how I'm doing this because I'd never done anything this scope before. I had worked with musicians remotely and it was always a stress because you're not in the studio with them. You can't tell them, you can only guide them so much. And a lot of the roles as a producer, when I have people come into the studio and I'm recording to them, a lot of those roles and tactics that I would use, I didn't have. So one of the first things I had to do was accept that if I'm going to give people the opportunity to play what they want, I have to accept it. So I decided to send everybody just an acoustic guitar and vocal version of the song to a click track so that it was, tempoed. And then once everybody started getting back and picking which songs they were interested in, I started, I started with a big piece of paper and I wrote everybody's name down, what instrument they played. And then I started assigning them to songs. And this assignment this was the biggest part of it, was making sure that everybody had a part. Every guitar player, fiddle player, mandolin player, piano player, drummer, bass player, guitar player, vocalist, everybody had a part throughout the record that wanted one. Once I got that, I just sent the tracks out and I said, you said you wanted to do vocals and acoustic guitar on this track. Here it is. If you hear anything else, please feel free to put it in. And then I started getting parts back. So, I'd have vocal and guitar on my computer, and then somebody'd send me a bass track and I'd lay it in. I'm like, that sounds kind of groovy. Then I'd get a fiddle track and that sounds groovy. And then I'd get a drum track. I'm like, okay, the drums don't match with the bass. So we might have to do a little bit of tweaking there, but this is still working. And then massage it a little bit. And then the track started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And we got about 60% of the way through the collection of everything. And so like I say, it started with acoustic, vocal, and then the other instruments started going in. And we got about 60% of that way. And then my wife, one of the side effects of her treatment was osteoporosis. And this was probably about the time that me and you were working together too. She had stood up, she was learning to stand again, and she was standing up with her walker and her hip exploded. So she had to go in for emergency surgery, and then she was supposed to go to a rehab, but the rehabs were closed because of COVID. So they sent her home to me. So I had a wife 2 days out of surgery. She'd been in bed for almost 2 years at this point, recovering from something else. And they sent her home to me where I had to set up a hospital room in my house, and I was her primary caregiver. And I only had like 60% of the record done. Everything else was coming in, but it hadn't sort of happened yet. So I reached out to Mike Turner. Mike had reached out to me really early on in the process and said, Ken, this is a big album. I'd love to jump on board and help you mix. And I said, awesome. That'd be amazing. Mike Turner's an awesome guy. He's got an awesome CV of amazing musical history. And as a producer, he's amazing as well.
A little studio down on the lakeshore, right? Inside Pocket Studios.
Pocket Studios, yeah.
Yeah.
And he's just a super guy. And I spoke to him and I said, listen, Allison's broken her hip. I said, my days are done. I said, like, I don't have the hours in the day, and I won't for the next 2 to 3 months. I said, I'm not sure what to do. And he said, Ken, as the files come in, listen to them, drop them into your session, make sure that they fit, and then just send it to me. So I started doing that. And there was a few things that, if I got something and it was like, oh, I got an hour, Allison's sleeping or something, I could do a little bit of tweaking and do the edits the way I wanted. And then I would send it to him. But a lot of it just got sent straight to him. And then the months went by, and then in the fall, he reached me and he sent me a link and it's like, here's the record. And I kind of went, oh, cool. And then I realized I hadn't listened to anything since I think it was late July. I hadn't heard anything in full context. I just heard bits and pieces.
Wow.
So all of a sudden in November, I get this album back and there's stuff I've never heard on it before.
That's
and
great.
it sounded great. He tied it together so well. He made 45 musicians sound like they were playing together.
It sounds incredible. Sorry to cut you. It sounds like you guys had time in the studio together. I just want to say
that. We had the benefit of some professional musicians who have access to studios. Like, for example, when we got the drum tracks for Mad World, Daniel Adair from Nickelback played those drums. He went into his studio with his engineer and he produced a smashing drum track. I mean, I think there was 32 tracks of audio on this drum kit. Wow. And it was, every mic was doubled. So if you didn't like the way the kick sounded, you could listen to a different mic and get a different, like, it was all it was the way that, when you have lots of money, you can make records.
Yeah.
And the same with Tommy Mack's bass playing and some other people that sort of have good professional studios. And then there's a bunch of us that record records, like Dale from the Headstones, Danny from the Watchmen, myself, Dave Gunning, where we have nice home studios where we can make records in them, but it's not a professional commercial studio. And that stuff came in really nice. And then I had people, one of the guys who was playing drums said, I've only got 2 mics. I'm going to set my drums up in the garage. Where do you think I should put the mics? And I'm like, okay, well, put one on the kick and one by the snare and let's see what it sounds like. And, it sounded different, but it was also sounded just fine. It was just like, once we put all these things together, everything sounded really cohesive. And the funny thing is, at the end of the day, I listen to it and I don't hear a Ken Tizzard record. I mean, I hear me singing and I know that I chose the songs and I know that I did the arrangements and picked the keys and all that stuff. But if I had these 45 musicians in the studio and recording under me producing, the album would not sound like this. Now, that's not a bad thing because it's actually like, I mean, there are like when I got the tracks back for Brown Eyed Girl, I played Brown Eyed Girl very slow and maudlin for a long time. And I refuse, I don't know why, but every time I have a guitar player playing with me, they're like, oh, you're doing Brown Eyed Girl? I'm like, yes, but don't do that friggin' line. Like, I don't want to hear that line in the song. And that's always been my rule. And sure enough, when I got the song back, there was 3 people that put that line in and I went, it's got to go in there.
I guess it's got to be. Yeah.
I had to follow the vision of the record, which was everybody contributing what they could. And yes, there were times where we cut some stuff out, harmonica is one of those instruments. Usually when you get a harmonica player to play, they will play from the front to the back of the album or the front to the back of the song. And then you can, pick where and when it comes out. Same with fiddle players and piano players and organs. So there was some building like that. But for the most part, I mean, everybody that contributed, what they contributed is there and it sounds like them. And they're so, and there was the third sort of component of musicians were hobbyists, so to speak, or people that, have day jobs, but love playing music and they've been doing it for a while and they might play in a local band or something, but they're not professional musicians, as in they don't make money at it. And these people were so excited to be working with some of their idols. And some of the idols who are friends of mine, personal friends of mine, were so excited to do it because we were in the middle of this COVID shutdown. They suddenly couldn't tour. They didn't know what to do. And here I was ready to make a record and they all kind of went, let's do this thing with Ken. Yes. So they were happy. And it just, all this love and positivity came into it.
Yeah, that's great, man. Because like you said, it's been in the works for a long time. I mean, you were mentioning it to me again, like you said, when we were talking back in, must have been April or May.
Yeah. First getting into the way.
Yeah, and now we're here. It finally came out in May of this year. So I mean, that's I get things that kind of put some stops to it. But like you said, Mike Turner got in there and made it all happen and brought it all together. It's incredible, just the work and the people that have gone into it. Because some other players on this is Matt Mays, Ronnie Hawkins, the lowest of the low. I mean, and like you mentioned, Daniel Adair of Nickelback, Tommy Mack of Hedley. So, I mean, you've got all these names. You got Danny Greaves from the Watchmen and now Sterling Greaves. It's how did you determine where and what songs these guys were playing on? Was that up to you, or did you give them some songs to kind of look over and
Well,
think about?
it was all based on the 13 songs. And like, you know, when I was doing Mad World, I was talking to Tommy about it. And Tommy wanted to play bass on, he'd already told me 2 or 3 songs he wanted to play bass on. Mad World was one of them.
Fantastic
And
version of it too, because you have your slower version of the song,
yes.
which is nice, and then you listen to the All Together Now version, and man, it's
It's
so
pretty
good
heavy.
too.
It's pretty smashing. I mean,
Yeah,
but it was Tommy who said, let's get Daniel involved. And I said, I know Daniel. I mean, I've known Dan from the Martone days, but so, you know, I don't really want to bother reaching out to people. I want this project to be people who want to do it and have come to me.
yeah.
And he said, well, he said, he said, I'm going to be talking to Dan later. I'll mention it to him. I said, well, you can mention it to him. That's fine. Cause that's what I was doing, through my social posts. And, he called me back that night. He said, Dan's totally into it. You know, just send him the files and he'll record the tracks this week. Like, fuck. Okay, cool.
Great.
But everybody else kind of came in, you know, the guest vocalists, you know, we do have Working Class Hero, which has myself, Danny from the Watchmen, Matt Mays, Chris from C-Spot Run, and Ron Hawkins from Lowest to Low. We each take a verse in that. That was the one song where I had to kind of curate and decide who I wanted into it. And the musicians that I have chosen to be a part of this song are ones that I feel are working class heroes. You know, none of us have struck it rich. You know, we're all still struggling. You know, we do what, you know, Danny's outside of his music, he's got his bar. You know, everybody in this list of people singing on that song are lifelong musicians that have worked really hard for it. And I felt that was a really nice, deserving thing to add to the album. Musically, other than that, it was kind of it was a bit of a free for all. It was kind of like, some people wanted to play bass on a couple songs and there was a few overlaps. And I said, well, this other person's playing, but maybe we'll mix the two together, or maybe we'll go with this one over that one. I don't know. At the end of the day, I think everybody is really, really happy. I've gotten messages from everybody involved, and they have loved watching this project together. They've loved the experience of watching me go through it. It's just, it really has been positive and stress free, you know, coming up to release day. I mean, now that release day is here, it's a little different because there's a different type of work involved, and we're dealing with an age where every musician in the world is home recording music and trying their best to put it out. Spotify is getting, what was the number I read today? I think 60,000 tracks a week uploaded.
Yeah, exactly. It's either like, a week or a day.
It's either a week or a day, but yeah. How do you know, now I'm here. I'm like, okay, great. This, you know, I got this record. It's amazing songs. Everybody knows all the songs. Everybody knows all the musicians. We've got all this powerhouse of Canadian talent and some American talent. And then it's kind of like, okay, but how do I compete with, you know, fucking Alicia Keys is putting out songs from her bedroom. Like, everybody's doing this.
Yeah.
So it's a weird thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's again, it's out there. It's people are loving it. I mean, I feel blessed for everybody who wants to speak publicly about it with me, like yourself, and for all the streams and sharing that I'm getting online. I mean, I know I've reserved myself for the fact that it doesn't turn into money.
Right.
You know, for anybody interested, I mean, in my 30 years of music, I think collectively, had I at 17 got a job at McDonald's and worked my way up to a 52-year-old manager, I probably would have made the same amount of money over the course of the 30 years, but it wouldn't have been near as enjoyable.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And that's really, you know, it is the joy. And this album brings so much joy because of the people involved with it. And the selection of music also has a strong resonance with people.
Yeah, well, exactly. And that was, you know, something else I was thinking too. I mean, you got songs on here from Tom Petty, Bob Dylan, like you mentioned, John Lennon, Billy Bragg. There's a great assortment of songs. I mean, for everybody almost to be able to, you know, listen to it. And again, you're putting your own Ken Tizzard touch on them, as well as these other musicians. How did you get to selecting these songs as the 13 songs that you wanted the album to be made up of?
Well, so about 12 years ago when I retired, maybe longer, when I retired. 12 years ago,
yeah, that's right.
Like I never played covers.
Right.
And I only started playing a guitar like in the last 10 years, like when I realized I was going to be a solo artist, I have to have an instrument I can play, and bass, even though I did the bass solo record, you know, that wasn't something I wanted to continue doing. And I got into the acoustic guitar, and of course, to kind of cut my teeth and get used to singing and telling stories and all that stuff, I started doing the coffee shops and the pubs, which was a weird time because I was coming off, I left Thornley in the middle of not in the middle, but it's sort of towards the end of that big Nickelback tour, so I went from playing to like 40 to 60,000 people a night to, 6 months later, sitting in a coffee shop in Burlington, Ontario for, with 3 people there and going, okay, what have I done? But it was something that I needed to do. And during that time, I was playing all original material. And I realized that, in this environment, people want to hear some songs they know. Yeah. So I started compiling a few, but ones that were my own and ones that I had taken and transformed into something that I felt like, well, if I had written this song, this is how I would have played it. And it takes a long time to do that. So when this record came about, I wanted to pay some respect back to my 80s influences, REM, The Clash, The Cure. Mm-hmm. Who else was on that from the 80s?
Boomtown Rats.
Boomtown Rats. I really wanted to do that. And then I wanted to also, I wanted to touch on some of the songwriters, the narrative songwriters that have influenced me. And that brought in the Tom Petty's, Neil Young, Bob Dylan, and Slade Cleaves. Slade Cleaves is the most contemporary artist on this record. And I think Green Mountains and Me is probably 10 or 12 or 14 years old at this point.
There's something about that song. I didn't know it before I heard it from you. It's just a beautiful song. So I just wanted to add that in there. Green Mountains and Me is just beautiful, touching, and I'm glad that you introduced me to that song. So I just wanted to mention that.
Slade is one of those artists that I've been following for a long time. He's a storyteller, and he tells stories in his songs in a like the narrative style of songwriting. Tom Petty has those songs where it's like, you listen to it from front to back and it takes you on a journey. And then he also has those songs where it's just kind of sing-along rock pop songs. And a lot of artists have that, but Slade really focuses on the narrative. He tells stories in his songs. And the first time I heard that song, the imagery of the parents getting the death notice from the soldiers and stuff, it just floored me. And I got an email from him this morning saying, great version on the song. He said, I've listened to the whole record. He said, a bunch of these songs I've covered in my past. He said, it's really, he complimented me. He said, it's really nice that you managed to do something productive with music during this time. So that was really nice to hear.
Wow. From yeah. Had you talked to him? Had you met him or known him before this?
I've met him twice at shows where it's just been like a simple handshake and here, can you sign my shirt type of thing.
Yeah.
There's always a lineup at those things, and I don't like to strike up big conversations, but he's been a super nice guy, and he's been a major influence on me for the last decade. So I'm really glad to include him as well. So it covered everything, it cool. Sort of covered my rock, my folk, my singer-songwriter, and my 80s stuff, which is kind of the culmination of what makes me who I am, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Was it did your sister sort of twist your arm to put the Boomtown Rats song on there?
I think I might have put that one on more as a nod to her than anything.
Nice.
It's funny. Somebody asked me years ago to play that song, and that song is committed to memory lyrically. It always has been. And I remember I was at the pub, and I'm like, yeah, I said, I could sing that song for you, but I don't know what the chords are. And I kind of sat down, I started singing it, and I put some chords together that sounded right. And then that song kind of slowly worked its way in, and I recorded it and everything was great. And then a few weeks back, I went back and somebody said, oh no, I had a Boomtown Rats record, because I got my record player set up again. I broke out the vinyl and I put it on, I'm eating dinner. And I realized like immediately, oh, I've got the chords wrong in this. And then the bridge chorus thing comes in after the second verse. And I went, shit, I forgot about this whole section of the song. So like, it's probably been 20 years since I've listened to that song, but in that time I've created my own version of it. All the lyrics are exactly the same and the melody is close, but the actual structure of the song that was in my head and that I wrote it is nothing like the original structure. So that was an interesting thing to come across recently as well.
Yeah, that's hilarious, man. I think that's the biggest thing about this album and the way that you play these songs. You do make them your own, and I've had people say to me, if you're going to do a cover song, why not make it your own? Especially if you're going to record it. And that's what this album is. It's cover songs that
exactly
are not what you would expect to hear. It's something different. You want to put it on. You want to put on the Ken Tizzard version.
Well, yeah, and you want to hear some of your favorite old tunes and see how it's different. The semi bluegrass version of "Police on My Back,"
right,
is just amazing. There's a sort of countrified version of a Clash tune. I just love the freedom, the artistic freedom that came with making this record. Even though it was a lot of work, it was it was incredibly stressless to make. Mostly because of the people involved and my work with Mike Turner as well. I mean, he really, you know, he bared down on this one hard, and he did a really, really good job.
Yeah, yeah, and that again, it just shows the you know again the kind of relationships that you can build and that you have built yourself in the music world, and it's sort of been an ongoing theme with a lot of my episodes. Is just how great the music community is, and everybody within it, and you know especially during this time how people have come together, you know, and this is a perfect example of, you know, just musicians saying, you know, we've got to come together right now, and you know, all together now. Let's do it.
Exactly. And I'm seeing it more and more. I'm seeing lots of bands, like not so much making records, but I'm seeing it coming out of the States, like members of 3 or 4 bands cover this classic song.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really, I think this is the other thing that the lockdown, the worldwide lockdown over the last year has created is, and I've been so down this niche myself for a long time, is the removal of the smoke and mirrors. You know, hearing a song as it actually is. I know the smoke and mirrors are part of the big show, you know, especially with some of the younger stuff. I take my daughters to see shows, sometimes even big shows at like the Air Canada Centre, and it's all pre-recorded tracks, and there's 2 people on stage, and there's not even a band. And it's like, okay, this is cool. I get it for what it is, but it's not what gets me going. And watching people like Elton John, Robert Fripp, Mike, the guitar player for Tom Petty, Mike Campbell.
Mike Campbell, yeah.
All of these people are Burton Cummings. They're playing home. They're setting up their phones and just playing. And you see the beauty of the song, and you hear people's voices in a natural sounding room. I mean, a lot of them don't sound great, but they sound real. And I think that this whole sort of removal of the gloss and the finish that so much music is packaged with nowadays, I think that seeing things in a raw environment is really going to be, I think people have realized once again how nice it is to see our musical and artistic friends living normal lives and giving some backstage, for lack of a better word, backstage access to people.
Yeah.
You know, the myth of rock and roll, I sort of blogged about it this week. You know, there used to be a time when Led Zeppelin had toured. And I mean, even in Newfoundland as a kid, I'd hear tour stories, you know, rumors that somebody would tell me. And I'm like, how did this person hear about some Led Zeppelin show in England from 9 years ago? You know, but it was all myth and mystery. And nowadays, you know, I could probably see what Robert Plant is eating for lunch.
Yes.
It's a different thing. And I've been embracing that for a long time. And I'm really happy to see the world turning onto it, because it's not easy to write good songs. It's not easy to play a song from front to back and remember it all. It's not easy to do all these things perfectly. And it's definitely not easy to do, you know, 15 to 20 of these every week and keep it fresh. It's really hard. But I think that people are really accepting of it nowadays. You know, I think they're craving it a little bit of the more of the authentic stuff. And that's a really neat thing to see happening.
Yeah.
So many artists are involved in it. It's just great.
Yeah. And I think, you know, if anything, that's what would lend to the success of this, is the fact that because through your Whiskey Wednesdays, people are seeing that, you know, that side of you. You have your crowd, you have your fans, you have those people that show up, you know, weekly. And
every Wednesday.
Yeah, and that's perfect. And you know, the big thing is consistency. It's all about consistency, and you know, but again, even in this time, it's kind of tough. Like, is it about consistency? Is it still gonna work? You know, because there's always that question of like, will people show up, or will they just wait till next week? But you know, you do it, and I think you do it for yourself a lot of the time, right? I mean, is this like, you know, an escape for you as well? Every Wednesday, you know, you're like, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to play my tunes, and, you know, I don't care who shows up.
It's been that way for Whiskey Wednesday. Had just entered its 11th year as a local residency at a place called That Little Pub. And, you know, there were nights in February where I sat down with me and the bartender and 2 other people, and I sit at the bar with my acoustic guitar and just play whatever they want to hear all night.
Yeah.
There's also other nights when there's a, you know, crowd at the front and back door and no room inside. And what I've learned, what makes it good, is that everybody knows Wednesday night from 8 till 10, I will be at the pub. And if I'm there, this person, and this person are going to be there. It has little to do with the music. It has to do with the regularity of going to a place where you know you're going to find something that you're looking for, and it's going to be consistent. I wasn't sure how that was going to translate online, but I think the same thing applies. I think if you have something consistent, I mean, I get messages now from people saying, you know, Wednesday night is my Saturday night of the week. It is my night out. It is my night to sit and have drinks, and it happens every Wednesday, and they're there every Wednesday.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing thing. I mean, for me, it's a great chance to play and to kind of, you know, my Wednesday mantra is, you know, this is the night, this is my off night. Wednesday, my off night it's funny because what started off as, you know, Wednesday is the one night of the week where I'm definitely off. I should start a residency on this night, because usually come Thursday, I'm traveling somewhere for the weekend and I get back Sunday or Monday. So Wednesday was my safety. That was my night off to get drunk, drink whiskey, and play a bunch of tunes that I didn't really know. And now it's turned into like the most important night of my week, but it's still me kind of, you know, getting drunk and playing songs I don't know. But I just think that, you know, I think it's gotten to a point where, you know, people, they don't expect it, but they respect it. And they really have a good time. I mean, even last night, I had a couple messages after, you know, and one of them almost brought me to tears, just from somebody who'd said, you know, they lost their son last year and they've watched every Whiskey Wednesday since, and this has been their solace and it's helped them get through. And it's just that like, that's enough for me right there. No, that there's one person out there. And then, you know, sort of developing it. And when I can have the band here, it's great, you know, because I get the boys in, we're working on new material. We can play new songs that we're working on just for people to hear. It's really, truly a behind the scenes, you know, it's raw, but I think that's the beauty of it.
Yeah. I mean, you have great stories. I almost feel like it's like 60-40 Ken telling stories, 40 playing songs, because.
Well, I mean, on an average night, 9 to 11 songs. I mean, I played 10 songs last night, and it was an hour and 40 minutes. Last night was a long one. It was a lot of talking. Yeah, I mean, there are times when the talking is more than the songs.
Yeah, no, it's great, man. Though, like, that's, you know, that's what I really loved about, you know, when I was tuning in on a regular basis, was like, what's Ken gonna be talking about, you know, and what kind of stories could he add in there, and I think it's another connection point for your audience, because you have so many of those years of playing at that little pub, and so much of that audience from there tuning in now, you know, you're able to give people a shout out and, you know, say, hey, that's why, you know, this song is written about that person, and this dog ran away, and this, you know, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's I mean, that is what makes the show what it is, and I look forward to continuing developing it. You know, my next thing is to be able to actually have guests on in a way that's functional and, you know, not glitchy. So I'm going to start working on that soon. I'd love to have some musical guests where we can actually jam together, but I don't know if the speeds are up for that.
I can't believe somebody hasn't made this happen yet. All right. We've been in pandemic for over a year now. What's going on here? Huh?
I can't figure it out either. I mean, you know, we can work on Pro Tools sessions remotely. You know, the Pro Tools session can be hosted in a cloud, and I can be adding bass while somebody's adding a guitar in another place, all simultaneously. But for some reason, I can't seem to get it so I can play with somebody on the screen. But we're going to keep working on that. And I can guarantee, I mean, my vision for Whiskey Wednesday has turned into something like, you know, eventually being like a hee-haw. Like I'd love to have a space in town where I have like 40 seats, and I can bring bands in every week, and I can have guests on and stuff like that. That's the future goal of what I'm going to do with this, because I'm really enjoying it, and people seem to really enjoy it as well.
Well, you know, again, and you've taken it, like you've had it from starting out from your phone, then I think from your computer, and now it's obviously it's always going to be from your computer, but audio wise, you know, you have always you just continued to evolve. And I think anybody that knows you you are kind of a techie guy that, you know, you want to, yeah, exactly. Right. Well, you know, it's just kind of, it goes back, you know, you were the first guy that brought like a website to the Watchmen, weren't you? That's like, that's going way back. So I think to see how you've evolved the equipment, you know, it's I guess no surprise, but at the same time, it's like, it sets a standard almost. It's like, you know, it's, you know, how can these, you know, musicians do it the same way? And you had a really cool sort of backstage tour, I guess, of your backstage tour of your equipment, your setup there. So, you know, I think it's great.
I like to keep that going. You know, when I was researching doing a live webcast, there was a friend of mine who does quite a good webcast, And he did a public post about, now that we're shut down, everybody wants to do their own live streams. He said, he said, I'm getting so many bands reaching out to me saying, what gear are you using and all this? He said, I spent 5 years, building my studio so that I can have all this stuff. And, I went through all this trial and error. I'm not going to share it with everybody. Go out and, learn your own stuff. And I kind of heard it and I went, fuck that. I'm going to tell everybody everything I'm using. And that's the way I've been with it because, for musicians, I mean, even, like a little thing like the iRig, which is it's a little tiny interface. It's $250, but what it allows you to do is take, you can take an out from your, like for me, I use my Pro Tools system, which has 20 odd microphones plugged into it when I have the full band, and then I take the left right out of that. It goes into this little box, and that box plugs into my phone, and then whatever mix you have is what the phone sends out to the world, as opposed to your crappy speaker or whatever. Simple thing, $250. But to get to that, I went through 5 or 6 different pieces and they didn't quite work properly. So I don't want people to be wasting money. And that is the key to the audio. The key to the video is Switcher. Switcher lets you use your iPhones. Everybody has 1 or 2 iPhones right around now. When I do the show with the band here, I have 8 phones set up around the room, and my daughter sits with her iPad on Switcher and picks which phone is being broadcast at which time.
Wild.
And it looks pro, but it's all done through the internet. It's done on iPhones. There are cheap ways and good ways to do things. And I don't, I like to share that stuff with people because I'd love to see more of us doing this. I really do think this is a great thing. And I will be integrating everything that I'm doing live stream with my live shows from now on. It's no longer I'm playing live here and I'm doing a live stream there. It's just all going to become one thing. I think that's this technology that we have right now and the ability to do pretty much whatever you can imagine, aside from having 2 people playing in different locations at the same time. It's all there. It's all there. And if you look around, there are tons of interesting, fantastic people out there willing to share their information. And again, everybody helping everybody is the way that we're going to move forward.
100%, man. That's amazing. Well, we've talked a lot about your Whiskey Wednesday. That's that's the heart. That's the heart, I think, of you, Ken. And anybody will post a link to that. What else? What also? I just want to finish off here, just to kind of understand what's coming next, maybe for what you're doing, because you've also through Whiskey Wednesday created Ken Tizzard Music for Goats, right? That's where that band came from. Is that from your Whiskey Wednesday? Are you guys working on an album, or will be working on one? Awesome. Perfect.
We are working on an album. What I'm trying to consider now is whether I, record an album and put it out in the fall or Christmas, or whether I just start recording songs and putting them out as singles. I'm not quite sure where the value is anymore.
Yeah.
According to the record company, the corporate side of things, singles are the way to go. I love a record though. So I'm on the fence. So over the next while, you may see some demos coming out from us. We have some really cool new songs. I'm really excited about it. This will be my first original album in a while. No Dark, No Light came out in December of 2015, so it was really a 2016 release. That was the week it came out was the week that Alison was diagnosed with MS.
Wow.
And I made that record, and I had a tour planned, which I had to cancel. I managed to get through most of the record and do most of the tour dates that I wanted to, but we were really going through a period of adjustment, just trying to figure out, what does this mean for our life? What does this mean for Alison working? What does this mean for everything? And that fell into then touring on the record and then playing it. And then the following year, Ron died. And I was trying to write, but I was having a hard time writing because I was just writing about Alison being sick. And as much as it was therapeutic, there was no songs that I felt like this is a good enough song to be recording, even though my songwriting was taking, for the front seat in my therapy. And this went on for a long time. And it wasn't until we moved to Ottawa 2 years ago for Alison's stem cell, when she was in her hospital bubble. There was a period of 70 days when she was going through a severe part of the treatment. And I was in the apartment building next to the hospital, monitoring her every day, but I had my nights to myself. And that was the first time that I felt clear-headed enough to start writing. And that was when I wrote the majority of what will be the new record. And I'm really happy with it. It's a really interesting mixture of country, folk, and then on the other side, it's kind of like the Pixies and television. It's a really weird thing, but it's going to be really cool. I'm really excited for this next record.
Combining a little bit of the two worlds of Ken Tizzard, the two
exactly,
musical
yes.
worlds. Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, No Dark No Light is a great album as well. Home is my favorite song off of that album. It's
a favorite amongst many. I do like that one.
Yeah, just beautiful. You put a cool video up. I'm sidetracking now, but you really a cool learn how to play Home on YouTube as well.
Yes.
So
yeah, that's up there as well.
Yeah. So that's awesome, man. You are just a great connector with your audience. And, this album altogether now shows you have great connection with the music community, and people respect you, you respect them. And it's a great album, and really appreciate, you taking the time to go through it all. You can go and check out Altogether now. It is now streaming. It is a great group of cover songs. Created by just an incredible array of fantastic Canadian and American musicians. So Ken, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me about the album.
Well, thanks, Alex. And you were one of the original people that supported me and helped me out when I was doing the Whiskey Wednesday. I was terrified. I think I told you back then, I was scared of the permanency, but you helped me to understand what it was all about. And there was a period of a couple months where you were doing all the editing on my videos and stuff. I really appreciate that. It was great help, and it helped get me into my own rhythm. And, I won't forget that. It was a great thing. And also your work with Indie 101 is amazing too. You do great stuff with Daryl over there.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it. He's the reason why we connected, and I'm so thankful we did. And, just was happy to help out. And I'm just excited to keep watching what you're doing, Ken.
Thank you very much, Alex.
All right. Take care, man.
Cheers.